Good evening, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this North Sales webinar on strategies for a successful One Design racing season. This is Zeke Horowitz down here in Annapolis. It's Party Shirt Thursday here at North Sales. We just wanted to thank everybody for taking some time to join us. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes here while we let some people in from the waiting room and some last-minute registrants just kind of catch up and get in with us here. The idea for today's talk, we're going to just kind of talk about approaching the season in general, how to kind of define success, lay out some goals, get your team, find your schedule, kind of all the stuff that we have to do to prepare for success and fun and a kind of a full season of One Design racing. While we kind of wait these next couple of minutes just to get some people in, just wanted to have everybody kind of take a look at the beautiful Annapolis Yacht Club here and just kind of remind everybody that while we're patiently waiting for sailing to start and for all of us to be able to get back on the water and go racing, how important it is to make sure we're staying involved and active and supporting all of our local sailing associations, be them yacht clubs or local fleets, certainly your One Design classes and sailing centers, and just make sure that we're all in as good a situation as we can be to get back on the water and start having fun. So looks like probably everybody's kind of getting in here to this, and we're gonna carry forward. So without further ado, I'll introduce our host for this evening's webinar. You may know him as the International Man of Mystery. Here in Annapolis, we just refer to him as Misha. So without further ado, Austin Powers, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here, Zeke. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. A lot of people wonder whether I was named after the movie. I was named before the movie, so we'll just go ahead and knock that out right there. I'm joined tonight by both my two fellow office mates, and Zeke Horowitz and Allan Terhune. They're both very, very well-known One Design racers, not just in this country, but throughout the world, as we have some world champions amongst us tonight. Zeke, can you tell us a little bit about your specialties and some of your successes, and then we'll talk to Allan here after that.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm just a big One Design enthusiast. I try to race in as many One Design classes as I can. It's kind of small keel boats, but started out in the junior sailing, the whole Opti program, and college sailing, and into the small keel boat One Design stuff, and just try to get around as much as I can and sail as many regattas as I can and learn as much as I can, try to catch up to the resumes of the likes of Allan and company.
Yeah. So what about you, Allan? I see you got a 2X and a bunch of 12-time national champs.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about all that?
I think it's, similar to Zeke. You grew up sailing in New Jersey on some Tom's River prams, we called them. We didn't have Optis back then. That's how old I am. I'm not like you two young guys. But yeah, just like Zeke, kind of sailing as many One Designs as I can and traveling around with my buddies and going to regattas and, had some success along the way, which was pretty fortunate. And I think that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Well, we'll go ahead and get right into it here. I joined North less than a year ago, and I know I've learned immensely from these two guys. So we're just going to go ahead and pick their brains on getting into a One Design racing season. What are some things that they're focusing on, both with themselves and with the crews that they sail with? So when we get started, first off, Zeke, can you define what success is, and does it look the same for every team out there?
No, I cannot define success. I mean, I can define success to me, but I think, it's up to you. It's up to what you're, what you're trying to get out of your season. Hopefully the number one thing is having fun, and that can look a lot different to a lot of people. It's for me, it's really, really competitive, but I just think it's important that when you're looking at a season, which, your season could be just your local Wednesday night series, or it could be leading up to try to qualify for a big championship, or, to go to the Worlds in 2 years. But the idea is to get a good outlook on what that season is and decide what's going to be success to you. Maybe it's just sailing a certain number of days, finishing a series, moving up from last year's series, learning a new position, getting your family involved and your friends. And, maybe for some of us, it's trying to, win the Worlds this year. I know, for me, most of it is just, go out on a Wednesday night and tack on Allan as much as I can. That's success to me.
What about you, Allan? Are there any drivers that you use for success?
Yeah, and I think Zeke is spot on. I mean, I know it depends on the situation, and it depends on, who you're sailing with and what you're doing. I mean, it's, Zeke's right. If I'm out in the J22, it's we tack on each other as much as we can. And then, maybe we arm wrestle after, and then, maybe after a while we make up and become friends again. But if it's me and the star, I'm just afraid of like crashing into the dock and having the mast fall over. So, what the success is kind of different. Depends on, where you are. But I think one of the keys is actually talking through with your teammates what is going to be fun and what's going to be successful for you, so that there isn't, expectations that aren't in alignment. And I think that's where it can be unsuccessful, even if you win. And I think that's, one of the biggest, drawbacks. And I personally think that winning something is a pretty, hard goal to have, because there's so many variables, right? And it's, to me, being successful is playing the game as well as you can. If you get, on the podium at your big event, you've done well, right? And I think that's a bigger way of viewing success in a realistic way is kind of the best way to go about it.
Yeah, and I just think the key is just it's up to everybody, whatever you want to get out of it. I think we're all pretty competitive on some level, but sort of defining the things outside of results, based success are really important to just enable you to have as much fun as you can have out there, and to sort of reflect on if you don't get the results that you want. You can kind of look back and say, well, this season was all about, just getting out there on 90% of the Thursday night races,
yeah,
or just completing my first race across the bay, or whatever it might be. So it's really up to everybody, and it's important not to get lost in only results-based success.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense, guys. And I think as you build a crew, you guys obviously have been a part of a lot of different teams out there, both, and you've sailed all these different one design boats and had all of these different successes. When you guys are building a team, are there things that you look for, and how do you go about planning and organizing a team going into a racing season?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I mean, I think for me, it's a combo of things, right? It's people who, when you talk about what your goals are, that they're in alignment, but there's other parts, you spend so much time together and effort, it's got to be fun, and you really have to enjoy the people you're doing it with. And it doesn't matter if you're, pro sailing like, the three of us do sometimes, or you're just going out on Wednesday night with your buddies and whatever. I mean, I think the first step is, spending time with people that you want to be with. And I think now more than ever, we're learning that, all this time on the water is fairly precious, and it's not worth, spending that time with people that you just don't want to be with, right? I mean, I think that's priority one at the end of the day. At least it is in my book.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I couldn't agree more. But and sort of depending on what you decide is your idea of success. If you're somebody out here who says, hey, there's a North American Championship in my home waters this coming fall, I want to put my best effort and go out there and have the best results I can, and try to get a top 10 or try to win the event. You may kind of think about making a list of people that you think are the best suited to deal with that, and be ready to and open to sort of grow with your team. You're not going to get along perfectly with absolutely everybody out there. And it's kind of, about balancing the skills with, sailing with your friends or people that you obviously respect and want to have on your boat is the most important thing, as Alan said. But, this is kind of the really fun part to me, and setting a season schedule is sort of, identifying what events you think are going to be fun or important, or, the regatta that you might want to peak at. Meaning, that's where you want to have your top performance. And then you can sort of, I recommend just backing out of that and creating a schedule where you get as much good practice in at good venues and in good fleets, in good competitive fleets, and then share that, kind of tentative schedule with your ideal crew and your sort of list of potential teammates, and then kind of prioritize which event you want to go to, based on how you can be best set up to, for success in those warm-up regattas.
How are you guys communicating with your teams going into a season? Like, I know, Alan, when we sailed the winter series together, you were very organized and prepared in terms of briefing the team even before we got to the event with emails. Is that something you do as well, Zeke, or are you doing, I guess Zoom calls are now popular. You think those could be the way of the future with
the virtual regattas? We're all FaceTiming, but the line of communication is super important. It kind of depends on how big your team is. If you're sailing a 111 versus a Flying Scot or something, your team size is a little bit different. But the communication is really important, and keeping everybody focused on that sort of longer term season goal. So it's fun. It's able to like book the Airbnbs ahead of time and pick your venues and, where you pick to go sail. And that's, just keeping that line of communication open is really important.
So we already have a question in our online questions here from our office mate, Jonathan Bartlett has asked us, how do we define chemistry in selecting a team? So I'll take a quick stab at it. I know for me, it's being with people, that you have fun with, but also that are willing to carry their own weight and realize where they fit in on the boat, right? And I think it's really important, and Austin can chip in, he sailed with me some this winter. And, when you go sail any boat, I don't care if it's a J22 or if it's a 40-footer, if you have 3 people or 10, it doesn't really matter. Everyone's got to contribute something. And as soon as you have people who aren't contributing, or even worse, people on the team feel like someone's not contributing, it's when teams get pretty bad. And I think we all need to realize that what one person's contribution is maybe different than someone else's, but when they all go together, that's how you have a good team or a good successful season. So to me, that's how I define it. I don't know if you two have a different.
I liked going into this winter how before each event you would send out a kind of a checklist that each of us was responsible for on the boat. So one, that the owner wasn't stuck with having to do all these duties, and 2, that everyone felt like yes they had their list of responsibilities, and if we trusted each other to tackle that list. 1, we would get out on the water with everything we needed, food, water, batteries for the Velocitech, all of that. And 2, we wouldn't be that last team off the dock that's rushed to get out there, and we would be in the right frame of mind to go sailing.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to not when you're creating this team that's going to be together for an entire season or a longer period of time, it's so important to give productive feedback all the time and not let things kind of build up or fester if you don't like the way something is going or you don't like how the communication is going. I think one of my best friends in the world, Jackson, is on the call right now, and we've done a lot of sailing together in the past, and we've been very close friends since we were little Opti kids running around. So there's a lot going on in our relationship, and we both respect each other a lot as sailors. And sailing together was just a constant conversation of figuring out how we could best communicate with each other for the betterment of the team. But having both of us know that we're out here for the team and to learn and improve and just keep it open, that's the most important thing. And that's whether it's onboard communication in stressful moments or these pre-regatta emails saying, Alan's in charge of filling the waters every day and making the sandwiches, because that's really all he brings to the table.
It's true.
Yeah, but he does make
it really is true.
Yeah.
But somebody's got to do it, right?
It's an important job. It's a really important job. Everything's important, and just kind of being able to identify the roles and everybody executes.
Yeah. And even if it's not a role you're necessarily comfortable with, just taking it on and doing that. And I think, one of the other things that's important to me is giving everyone a little bit of latitude to have their own, space and way of doing things. And I think that's how, teams do get better, because at the end of the day, there's always something to learn, right? We know a decent amount of stuff, but we know nowhere near the tip of the iceberg of what there is to know about this stuff. And as soon as you stop learning from all your other teammates, it just gets bad in my mind. So I think that's the other thing, is giving people a little latitude to do what they want to do and keep it kind of rolling. So
yeah, but the thing I love about doing all this is being able to. I think what's so important, again, just getting back to setting up your whole season. It's identifying what is important to you based on the events that you want to do or event that you want to peak at, and just backing out of it. It's never too early, to start thinking about events. And many world champions will tell you that they identify a world championship 3 years out and start making plans for what regattas they want to do with their team. And there's so much that goes into sailing, with logistics of travel and hotel accommodations, airplanes, equipment, when you're going to get sails, when you're going to, wax the bottom of the boat again or replace winches or whatever it is. There's just so much that goes into it. And starting early and kind of envisioning the whole season ahead of time is just such a better way to have fun, so that you're not getting down to your regatta and you leave the dock and your shroud explodes. It's just not fun, and it's totally preventable by just getting ahead of it and looking at the season from way ahead.
So I have a question from the audience from Matthew Schubert, and I'm going to ask each of you the same question. And it was, what was your career highlight, and what enabled you to achieve that career highlight?
Alan.
Start with Zeke.
No, Alan first.
I'm not sure what the right answer of the career highlight would be. It's, everything's got different levels of rewarding. So like one example, I'd actually go back to even just this last summer. So I sailed on the local J111 team here, the Velocity, going to the Worlds in Chicago. And was it necessarily my career highlight? Not necessarily, but I think it's pretty applicable to what we're talking about in that, we sailed together for a year, same team, 8 people, a long build up to the regatta. We had some bumps in the road. There were some good team bonding moments of watching us all, starve to death and sweat to weigh in. But at the end of the day, it was kind of the choosing of the team, how everyone interacted, and actually seeing the process of a build up to an event and keeping it fun along the way. To me was super rewarding. I don't know if it was a career highlight, but kind of being persistent and having a plan and keeping it fun was rewarding, I think.
Yeah, I think, we've been very, very fortunate to have gotten to sail a ton and to have some success, in multiple classes in different arenas. But to me, just kind of thinking about it here, the things that pop into my mind are highlights all come down to the people that I've sailed with and the effort that we made. So I'm lucky to get to sail with my dad and the Flying Scot, and we've got some great memories of, either getting regatta wins or just good races together and just having fun sailing together. We put a great J22 campaign together with my now wife, Emmy, and Joanne Fisher and Jackson Benvenuti, just sailing with really close friends and having a lot of fun. And, winning the college team race nationals is a highlight. But all of that is it's about who we did it with and the effort that we put forward, which were really long. It was my senior year that we won the college sailing nationals, and we were close in the 3 years before that and didn't get there. And so it's such a long, we were trying to win that event for 4 years in college, and just being able to kind of bond with your teammates. Obviously college sailing, you're forced to bond with your teammates and grow as a group with, including the coach and the rest of your team that's not on the water. And those are the highlights in my mind, the process of getting to the top with people that you care about.
Gotcha. So it sounds like when you guys are leading up to a regatta, you guys have to identify some goals that you're going to want to achieve, for the regatta. Is that all results based, or how do you define whether you hit that goal at the end of each day, and how do you get the most out of every sailing day on the water?
Well, I mean, to me, certainly every regatta and every day can have some goals, and most of the time for me it's results based. But when you look at kind of a season from the broader spectrum, it's important to identify specific goals that you want to work on throughout the year. For instance, for me, in our sort of year of leading up to the J22 Worlds, I could not tack a J22 as the helmsman. I struggled with getting the traveler, set correctly and crossing the boat with the traveler without stepping on the main sheet and uncleating the main and having the main luffing. So that was a season goal for me. I went out every Thursday night that we could here in Annapolis, and I may have had a couple of adult beverages sloshing around the bottom of the boat, but I was practicing tacking over and over because it was a weakness. And we did a J24 season a year ago trying to peak at the Worlds, and we knew we needed to improve our heavy air boat speed. So we looked for every opportunity to just go out and sail in heavy air. So I think when you're looking at the season, just, you can pick specific events you want to get these results, or again, maybe you're just trying to go out and sail a number of days, but figuring out what you really want to get out of that season, and then in each particular event, is really important. If you know that you don't get off the starting line well on a Wednesday night, then, figure out a way to use this season to improve your starting. And it's these little kind of just chipping away all the time is how we improve our broad skills as one design sailors.
Gotcha. And so, Alan, we have a question from the audience, which I think transitions right into this for identifying goals. Charles Campbell wants to know, what are the keys to transitioning from, say, that local 15 boat, Wednesday night, Thursday night racing into, say, a 70 boat nationals, North Americans, or Worlds? How do you shift that mindset?
Yeah.
Get the team prepared.
Yeah, I think the big thing is just not getting overwhelmed by the fact there's 70 boats, right? The race is still the same, right? You go upwind, you get to windward mark, you turn left, and you go from there. And everyone, the big fear is starting, right? That's always the big topic is, 70 boats on the starting line. It's a big fear or cause of concern maybe. But to me, it's no different, right? You have one boat to leeward, you have one boat to windward. After that, all the other boats spread out over the line, you don't really need to worry about, right? So it's just still breaking it down to the basics of, what is sailing and bringing it back from this big daunting, task to, just keeping it simple. And I think that's the key. If you talk to anyone who does well in big regattas, it's keeping it as a simple focus, good starts, going pretty fast, staying out of trouble. And it's no different if there's 15 boats or 70 boats. I think that's the one key to me. It's just.
So another question for you guys. Would you say that sailing requires practice? We're talking about practice.
Are we talking about practice?
We're talking about practice.
Not
Would
the
you
game?
say it's necessary? Is it, do you have to do it? Can you get away with not doing it? What are your guys' thoughts on practice, and how do you get the most out of, if you do go out occasionally for practice?
To me, it's important. I hate to define it as practice because I think it makes it less fun. So just trying to find ways of making it enjoyable. But to me, having goals and, going back to what your question before of what your weaknesses are, and maybe only pick one thing and do as Zeke said, you grab some beers and work on starting for a half an hour or whatever it is. It doesn't really matter. I think it's pretty key to do. And, if you talk to the good guys or the teams that are doing well all the time, even when they're messing around, they're always practicing something or trying something to improve. And, it's just kind of natural habit of being inquisitive and curious and figuring it out. I think it is important, but you need to have dedicated practice sessions per se, not necessarily, but finding ways to improve is important.
Maybe your practice is, the day before your regatta or the 25 minutes before your weeknight racing starts or whatever, where you just say, hey, you know what, let's get off the dock a half hour early and I want to practice some spinnaker ups and downs or practice some 720s or something like that. But, I think everybody, whether you are an amateur that sails a lot or sails a little, or you're a professional that sails a lot, I think everybody would tell you that just time sailing on the water is a huge, huge deal. Like it, just getting out and having some fun, having some adult beverages, but trying to accomplish something while you're out there and work on a new skill is really, really good. But just going sailing, just being out there. I know like Tony Parker, who I sail J24s with, is extremely decorated in the class, and he's been sailing J24s for 40 years or something. And he just wanted to get better at sailing the boat in breeze. And he just looked for every opportunity possible to go get on the water. And we sailed by ourselves for maybe an hour. Just he'd send us a note on a weekday and say, can y'all make it to the dock at 6 o'clock? And we'll go sail for an hour because it's blowing 20. And, just doing things like that, they really add up to making a huge difference in being comfortable on your boat and just getting more reps in. So, I agree with Alan. You don't have to define it and say, June 17th, we are practicing from 10 to 4. But look for every opportunity to try to get better outside of racing.
Yeah. And some of it, Austin, could be as simple as, you're going out with your wife or whatever, and you're just going cruising around in your J22. Maybe you are doing what Zeke was talking about. And while you're having a day sail, you happen to tack and you are thinking about how you move the tiller just through that 10 seconds, but at least you're still thinking about it. And I think that's the one thing that there's always an opportunity to learn something. It could be day sailing and just moving your jib leads around, right? I mean, it doesn't matter. There's ways to do it.
Do you guys do any sort of cross training in your practices, and do you find that important? And by cross training, I mean like switching people around into different positions on the boat.
I every time I do that, they see how bad at crewing I am, and I usually get kicked off the boat. It's usually what happens when I do it.
We saw that this winter for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I try to do something else and I just can't do it. So.
Yeah, I try to avoid the hard jobs for sure, like pulling strings and pulling sails up and down. I don't want to embarrass myself, but I do think it's important. And it's something that I talk about when you're trying to learn a new boat specifically. Like for me, I was trying to learn how to sail a J111, and I was calling tactics, and I didn't know how to sail a J111. And so we look for opportunities for if the if the usual skipper, the owner, couldn't make it for just a Wednesday night race, then I would go steer the boat, and then I would have some idea of how the boat moves and where it's going to be. And then we'd alternate and put a different, a trimmer where the tactician was. And, everybody kind of learns what's going on in different positions, and it's good. I think it's a good move to try out some new roles and just understand what that role takes, understand how long it takes for things, so that, as a tactician, you're not asking a trimmer to do something that is really too hard to do or impossible to do. So sure, I think it's a good thing to do if you've got the time.
We have a question from the audience from Douglas Wake, and I think it kind of parlays into what we were just talking about. Is he asked, how do you manage trusting your teammates to do their jobs and trust their judgment when you're sailing with so many different teams? And how do you set those expectations? Do you think practice is a part of that? How do you guys go about that?
Well, we should ask Doug Wake that question, because that guy's won as many lightning regattas, I think, as Allan has, just about. But I think it's a really, really good question. And boy, for me, I'm really fortunate to sail with really good people a lot. But I think that, by doing it enough and by doing enough positions over time, you realize that that's the only way to be successful, right? Like if you can have everybody on the boat focused on their job and doing their job, that's the best the team can do. It's not like you trying to micromanage what someone else is doing is not the best way for the boat to go around the race course. And so it's more about trusting that almost than trusting the specific person. And you just have to, like the hardest thing is with tacticians, but you just you live and die with their tactical calls, and you trust that they're going to put the boat in good spots, and it's your job to make the boat go as fast as you can. If you're a driver or a trimmer. So I look at it, Doug, as there is no other choice. So you flop from team to teams, and you say, what's my role? And you stick to your role, and you lean on everybody else to do theirs. And if you think they have room for improvement, then you find a productive way to make suggestions and be ready to be suggested to as well. But I would say trust that that's the best way to do it. And, that's going to set you up for the most success.
Yeah.
What about you,
and I think it's a couple things, right? I mean, I think we've gone back to the selecting your team part, and in part of that, you're trusting that everyone is trying their hardest, right? So if you're not doubting that everyone is trying, then that they're not intentionally giving you bad info or not doing the best they can. So it's to me, it's easy to trust them, because if you don't think they're trying their hardest, they're trying to give you what they think is right, kind of what's the point a little bit, right? To me. But I think the second part of Doug's question is the most important. It's setting expectations. And to me, that's just having a team meeting before you even leave the dock or do anything right from the get-go, because that's how you do it. And you're right. We sailed together this winter. We had not sailed together. It was me, you, my wife, Kate, Josh Goldman. And before we even left the dock the first time, we just talked about what everyone was going to do. And when we're sailing upwind, what would help the team. And it was, I remember talking to you, I was like, you helping more with jib trim and talking to me about where the main is, and maybe boats under the boom is most important. If Kate is focusing on boats to windward and the compass, and divvying up, and everyone knowing going into it what their role was, and then just letting people do it. Yeah. And if you don't want to trust them, I guess that's your own fault. Then you should have picked different people. But I think the key is upfront, just saying, just do this and let them do it. Yeah.
Well, and understanding that like you doing your job 100% perfect is going to make that person's job so much easier. I mean, we've all said it and heard it a million times, but like the best tacticians are on the boats that are going the fastest. It's way easier for a tactician to be really, really good if you're going really, really fast. We all know that. And if you're a driver, then make sure the boat's going really, really, really fast. And chances are you're going to be a lot happier with your tactician's calls. And if you're sitting there like looking over, trying to micromanage where the next shot's coming from, boat's not going to go as fast. He's going to have a harder time, and you're not going to do as well.
So we did have one question here before we switch off the practice one. We're asking what our favorite practice drills are. And I know for me, mine is really doing, and I do this on every race day, is doing some form of acceleration pre-start, just so you get a good feeling of how the boat is reacting that day to get up to speed. because every day is different. Wave state's different, wind's different. Just doing practice runs at the starting line. And you can do that on days you're not racing, but just getting a feel for how the boat maneuvers in medium or down speed to get to full speed is something I do all the time. I don't know if you two do, but that's my go-to when needed.
I love it. You can do a, you know, without any buoys out by yourself, you can just go out and stop the boat, do a 2-minute countdown and start the boat, accelerate the boat, stop it again, and just do it again over a mile going up the course. You know, you can do 30 accelerations in an hour if my math is correct. And I mean, that's 1 hour. That's really, really good practice. So that, and, you know, obviously the boat handling, just, we try to have a checklist of how many tacks to do before the race, or how many jives we're going to do, or on a practice day would be even better. And just, I think boat handling and time and distance acceleration are my favorite drills.
Gotcha. Are you guys using photos at all in these practices? And what mistakes do you see when people take photos of sails?
Well, I mean, I try and take photos of the sails for multiple reasons, but one is it's a good way to compare against other boats. And I actually think in this time, you know, where we are now, where we're probably going to be sailing with less people on the boat, maybe not necessarily racing, taking these photos is going to be pretty important, right? So these are 3 different photos that we use here at North Sails to help kind of get an idea of setup and trim. And, you know, I think in the next few weeks or months, as we start sailing, and it may only be the people in your house that you can go sailing with, this is a pretty good way to work on tuning and sail trim and things like that. I don't know if that's something you guys do, but I know pretty much every boat I'm on, I try to take photos like this and keep a record of when we were going well, when we weren't, and kind of figure out what we were doing wrong.
Yeah, and, you know, a big part of practice or tuning at regattas certainly is it's always going fast. That's probably what we spend the most time working on, is just going in a straight line next to other boats and trying to get faster. And these photos are a really good way, in the absence of a coach boat, with a great coach on board, is just to take these photos and be able to compare them with your tuning partners after a day of sailing, sitting at the bar and just kind of saying, oh man, you know, the bottom of your main was really a lot flatter. Maybe that's why you were going a lot better than we were, or that's clearly a big difference in how we were tuning the lowers, or something like that. But you can also, I do this all the time. I rely on, you know, other experts, some of my colleagues at North Sails. If, you know, there's a day where I'm curious about something, I'll snap a photo, and, you know, it takes 2 seconds. You can do it on the water. You can text a photo over to Coach Greg Fisher, and he'll say, oh boy, that looks terrible. You should never do that again, and try using your lowers 13 turns. And you'll go a lot better. So, you know, it's a really valuable resource. We've all got, you know, smartphones. We can text them over to sailmakers and just get some feedback on it. And I think these photos are really good, Alan, because, you know, in the jib photo, you can see all the trim stripes. That's the worst thing, is when, you know, somebody takes a photo of a sail, but you can't see the trim stripes. What's also really important on that photo with the mainsail on the right is you got some of the boom in there. I know Ched Proctor would kick my butt if I ever sent him a picture of the main without the boom in there, so that he can get a, you know, relative straight line going. So I don't know, Alan, what else are you looking for in these photos?
Yeah, I think you've hit it on the head. And I think, you know, as we talked about, this is a perfect time for, if you're out sailing, to take these photos and to share them with, you know, any of us, or you're right, whoever your expert is, and your local sailors, because you can gain a lot of insight as to what you're doing by taking these photos, and it's really easy. But the keys are, which you're correct, you got to get all the stripes in the frame, and, you know, get the boom if you're going to take the main, so you can get a straight line. So if you notice on all these photos, the sails are kind of angled in the frame, so that the stripes are kind of going one corner to the other to get the maximum distance to fit them in.
What about this middle photo? What are you guys looking for in this?
Yeah, so that one I try to look at just the exit of the jib, and to see where the leads are in relation to the main, and also to see how much headstay sag that you can see through there. And mainly it's for jib lead position. And I know on boats with in-haulers, this is a J111, but a boat like a J70 or an Etchells, or even a Flying Scot, where you in-haul the jib, or 420, it's pretty important, because you can see where the clue of the jib ends up, and how the relationship of the in-hauler or the windward sheet changes the profile of the jib. So I think all 3 of these photos, you know, any photos you take, really, if you're willing to send them to other people and talk about it, or even your own teammates, you can learn quite a bit. I mean, you can take a picture of a jib, move the jib lead back 2 holes, take another picture, and go home and be like, oh, wow, I didn't realize it made that big of a difference. And you can learn quite a bit.
Let me see in the chat if we have any other questions before we move on to the next subject. Looks like we're good.
Yeah.
So let's say it's race day, right? We've done our practice. We've got our team put together. We all trust each other. We all got the warm and fuzzies getting ready to go out for race day.
Yeah.
Do you guys go out on the water on a race day? You know, let's start even before we're at the boat park. Let's say we're starting. We just woke up. Do we have a plan for the day for the crew?
Yeah, absolutely. And I try to make that plan as repeatable as you can, with your team. And that's part of this season approach, is kind of saying, here's how we think we want to start, making our repeatable plan for a race day, or a pre-regatta practice day. All of that, or just an arrival at the Airbnb day in Miami when we have to unpack the van and all that kind of stuff. But certainly on a race day, the night before, we've already decided what time we want to leave the dock based on, the forecast, wind direction, what time the start is, how gnarly it may or may not be. But that's all predetermined stuff. So we're backing out of the start time of the race for the timing of the dock call. And as we were talking about before, like, everybody already knows, if dock calls at 8:30, it's Austin's job to fill the water bottles and make sure that the cooler is full of bars and the radios are charged and there's sandwiches on board and water. That's all going to be on the boat at 8:15, or I don't remember what time I started with, but everybody knows what that role is. The person who's going to, the same people unroll the main every day and hoist the main up in the same position. The same person starts the motor if you're sailing on a boat with a motor, or, however we launch the Flying Scot off the trailer every day. Like, you do things the same way every day, and people become experts at all the little things and just make it so smooth. I mean, how often do you see teams at the hoist, screaming and yelling at each other that they're doing trying to lift the boat up wrong, and the mast is banging into the spreaders, and, they're late to get down to the boat and someone's running from the bathroom trying to get their spray pants on, and it's just stressful. And there's just so much that goes into having a smooth day on the water, even in the best case scenario, that it just, thinking about it ahead of time and making a repeatable plan with your teammates based on their strengths is just a no-brainer to me.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Alan? Same thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing is just, again, you set the expectation, when dock call is, whatever it is, you're ready to go, but, you don't micromanage what people do up until then, right? I mean, if you tell me to be at the boat at 8:30, I'll get there and be ready to go at 8:30, but what I do between then and 8:30, you can't worry about what everyone's doing all the time, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's where you see some of these teams get in trouble, is they're just constant micromanaging everything, and it's.
Yeah, I know. I see Zeke there pretty early in the mornings doing a good stretching routine at every J70 event. So I think
I like to do.
I know you didn't mention it, but it's
before racing. Yeah, as I wolf down my bacon, egg, and cheese. And I think the same thing goes, like, on here you see the on the water warm-ups that, Alan was talking about with his practice going into the starting line, and between races, it's the same thing. It's the same deal. Like, it can all be stressful. Like, if we shrimp a spinnaker in a race, or we got to do a repair or whatever it is, but everybody on the team needs to know what their job is and all of those circumstances to make it run as smooth and easy as possible with as little yelling. So, if you're sailing on a windy day in a J70 and, the waves are going into the companionway, then somebody on the team knows that when they cross the line, they're going to throw the water bottles up and they're going to go sponge out the downstairs, which it's not going to be me, I can assure you, because I have trouble fitting through the companionway, but somebody does it, and it's just so great. It's so nice to have that. And, the other people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. So, but having that kind of predetermined and communicated on makes life so much more fun.
Mm-hmm. So the next scenario is we had a great day of racing. So Alan, what would do you do a debrief, and what would the debrief look like when we came in? We had a great day of racing.
Yeah.
What is talked about in that debrief?
I mean, I think the debrief is probably the most important part, because that's how you are able to go and kind of recap the day, whether it was good or bad, right? And I think Zeke said something about it before. It's how to be constructive but positive at the same time, and at least be able to have open conversations. The worst debriefs are where there's animosity and people aren't willing to share, their, whatever their actual feelings of the situation are. And it's funny, that's where the issues get unresolved and the team doesn't get better. So there's a fine line of, flat out fighting the whole time or whatever, but actually talking about, the situations and how to make it better. I'm a big proponent of doing the debriefs sooner than later. Like I hate doing the debrief at dinner per se. I'd rather do it while we're still on the boat, just after the boat's put away, have a beer, or if you're on a boat like a J111, you do it when you're motoring in. Because I'm a big fan of when you get to the dock, it's time to go do something else. Go to the tent party, go do what you're going to do. Like there's nothing worse than having like, oh, we're having a debrief in 2 hours. And then everyone's like drunk and they're over it and they don't want to talk about it. And it's just easier just to get it done. And, what happens on the boat stays on the boat and you kind of move on, right? I mean, I think that's
Zeke, you're laughing like you've been that guy that's.
No, Alan's just painting a really pretty picture. I mean, how do I get on your crew list, Alan? You sound like you guys are having so much fun all the time.
well, I mean, it's funny. I mean, like on the Vineyard Vines that we sail with the Baxters, we debrief pretty quickly. And, even if we have a coach with us there, we tell the coach, like, we want to debrief right away. And if it's going to be us waiting for video and all this other stuff, we'd rather meet you an hour or half hour earlier the morning before than get off the water, be tired, be hungry, and sit there and have to go through a lecture, right? So it's all the team dynamics. Maybe some teams would rather do it at dinner, but, I'd rather go to dinner and talk about, hopefully the football game that's on or whatever, and not think about all the other stuff. Just kind of get it off or do it the next day or whatever.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. The only thing I would add is also the idea of doing your debriefs afterwards, whether it's a regatta that you traveled to and you're now home on a Monday or a Tuesday and get an email thread going, or, you finished your Wednesday night race last night and then you went to you should go to your tent party and have fun and be social and doing all the things that we like. And then the next day, you can send out just, start an email thread with the whole team and say things we thought we did really well, things we need to improve on. We set the goal of getting better at starting, and I think we're chipping away, but we still have a long way to go. That stuff's really important, and you end up kind of keeping a little bit, like a notebook for that program or that team or that boat, and that's how you get better over time. But it should be everything. It should be fun. I did a J70 Worlds in Marblehead a couple years ago, and at the beginning of the season, I'll never forget our skipper Scott Ferneri he was like all big on his new notebook, and he wanted to take notes while we were sailing on what he was learning. The first thing he wrote in his notebook was peanut butter and jelly is good, because he decided that, after we were sailing for a little while, he had a peanut butter and jelly and he was like, that was really good. That made me happy. And that's important. Like, we had peanut butter and jelly the rest of the season because he liked peanut butter and jelly while we were sailing. So everything counts. And even your snacks or your beer choice are important.
Yeah, I agree.
So in one design, there's obviously the boats are the same in theory, and tuning plays an extremely big part of making the boat go fast. And like Zeke mentioned earlier, if the faster your boat, the better the tactician looks. And I know if we're calling tactics, we don't want to be on a boat that's slow. So what are some things we need to get the boat set up correctly? And what are kind of the 3 or 4 big takeaways on a boat that need to be right, or the boat's just not going to go how it should? Open to either of you. Yeah.
So Austin, to me, with our current, again, not being able to go sailing or do anything, this is the perfect time to work on this, right? Because getting the boat set up to its base tune, to me, is the most important thing you can do. And we now have really tons of time to sit here and do this. As a funny kind of side note, I got a newer star to me recently, but
what color is that star?
It's purple. I know.
For the record, yeah. What was the color again?
For the record, it is purple.
Yeah.
Got it.
But I spent a good day and a half outside just measuring the mast and getting, like you're saying, spreader sweeps and things, because it's all stuff you need. And now you have the time to actually sit down and do it and be patient about it and take measurements. And I think if folks go out right now and do some of the homework and get this stuff done and written down, it'll make their seasons that much better, because as soon as we can go sailing, they're going to be ready to go. And I mean, to me, I think it's a huge step forward right now. That's something we can do.
Yeah, and it's not that hard to do. Depending on your boat, you've certainly got a tuning guide from North or your other sailmakers out there. But there's tuning guides. There's experts in the class that you can make sure that your boat is correct. It's always good to kind of remeasure. But I think just understand. Alan mentioned having your base tuning correct so that you know where you are all the time. And that's, getting all these things you see in the picture, the calipers, the tension gauge, the tape measure, and the markers, so that you can, just make sure your head stay is where you want it to be. And maybe that's not the tuning guide. Maybe it's a little bit different based on what your notebook says from last season, or someone else's notebook says from last season. But just taking the time to have all that stuff and get it done, and having your own tuning matrix that's articulate for the way you like it. It has to be perfect. We don't have the ability to control a lot of things in sailboat racing, but your boat being tuned correctly and your equipment functioning properly, that you can control, and it needs to be perfect. Not only for top speed, but just having fun. So again, you're not leaving the dock and your shrouds are blowing up.
Yeah, so we pulled together a couple pictures for you guys of guys working their way through tuning. Do you guys have any important takeaways, like when measuring things like spreader sweep, head stay length, making sure the mast is centered? Do you have any tips for everyone out there that they can use to make sure, one, that they're getting these things measured correctly and then set up properly?
Yeah, so for me, on measuring if the mast is straight in the boat, I try really hard to use whatever halyard goes to where the shrouds intersect the mast at the hounds there. So if I was tuning a J70 or J22, I'd probably use the jib or the spinnaker halyard instead of the main halyard. And the other thing I usually try to do is hang some form of weight on that halyard and mark it with a piece of tape. I think it's really pretty hard to use a tape measure and keep the same tension when you're going from side to side. So I usually do it with a weight of some kind.
Yeah.
The other thing is, don't be afraid to write on the boat. I like on the J70, we caliper the upper and lower shrouds. I just write the caliper numbers right on the deck. Mm-hmm. There's no reason to have them hidden or do anything. Just write it on the boat so you have it.
Yeah, here's a good photo of,
jib leads at least. But yeah. I mean, everything, you can just mark the boat and write it on there. There's no reason not to. If you look at the top boats, everything is marked. There's just marks everywhere, and notes and numbers and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I think, have some help, because this stuff can be a little bit frustrating. Don't try to do it all by yourself. To make it so that it's easy and kind of fun to do. And my biggest advice is don't be lazy. And the reason I have that advice is because I'm lazy. And like if something looks like it's pretty darn close, I'm like, yeah, that's good. Let's put it away. Let's not take the extra time and drill the extra hole or something that seems like a daunting task. But as Alan was saying before, like right now, this is the time to do it. We have the time. We can't get out on the water necessarily right now, but we can get down to the boat and hopefully, safely, of course, but measure all this stuff and do it right. If you need to get some new gear to make sure it's right, go ahead and get it. But have help. That guy up there in the last slide is Ian Coleman measuring our Viper spreaders. And I think that he would tell you his key to success is to not let me touch it. I would just kind of have to sit in the van, and otherwise I'd get yelled at. But it's definitely important to take the time and do it.
I actually think that's an important point, though, right? Because he's part of the team, and you trust him to do it, and you let him do it. And I know when we sail together on the Star, it's the same way. I mean, do I go and measure things myself? Yeah, I do, just because I don't want to be uninformed when he's not there. But yeah, I trust him to do it, and we keep notes and do things. And that's, again, part of the team is doing that. And going back to your, how do you have a successful one design program? It's having everyone be invested in it, whether it's, tuning the rig or whatever. It's not just the best, whatever, doing it, or whoever it is, a pro on the boat, or, anybody can do it.
Yeah. And it's, as you said, trusting everybody to do it, and taking really, really good notes, because it's so frustrating to have to do this stuff over and over again. And you should be constantly always, of course, trying new things and trying to get faster, but then you need to know how to get back to where you were. So you got to have kind of a spreadsheet with different pages for different rig settings and different notes on when it was good, as basic as, it was 8 knots and the crew was sitting inboard or whatever. And at this setting, we were fast. You got to have that down so you can know how to get back to it. Because if you adjust your head stay setting from there, you got to be able to get back to that same, shroud tension and pre-bend. So, but all this stuff is pretty similar boat to boat, one design wise. And, we've got a lot of great resources out there between tuning guides and sailmakers or other pros out there. So take the time now to seek them out and get your boats right and tuned correctly.
So to wrap everything up, are you guys doing any sort of training, or are you taking the time to get in shape or grow mustaches, or what are you doing with all this extra time other than tuning to get yourself better at sailing?
I thought we were taking a slide out.
I'm doing webinars. I just decided to grow the mustache this morning, so that was what I wanted to do today to train during COVID. But yeah, try to read articles and read through your past notebooks. There's a lot of people doing these great webinars out here. You can get down to your boats and tune those up. Yeah, try to stay in shape.
I feel like we're all able to kind of whittle down the honey-do list, so when we can go sailing, we actually can.
That's a good point.
I mean, that's probably the best thing we can do right now. But I do think it going back to what Zeke said, it's also the tuning part is important. And if you're not sure what to do, there are different resources. Again, it's okay to call one of us and do a FaceTime and tune the boat or whatever. It doesn't have to be one-on-one there. There's easy ways to do this now with the technology we have. And to me, being fast is the most important thing that will make all this easier. And it all starts with that. So I think it's kind of like if that part's not there, all this other stuff we talked about is pretty irrelevant in my book.
Mm-hmm.
But
well, thanks for joining us today, guys. Just for everyone listening in, our contact info is there. If you guys have any questions regarding where we got these shirts, where we got these hats, these sailing tips, we can answer them right there. I have some chat or some questions coming into the chat real quick. Oh, no, just everyone saying thanks for watching. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. And if you have any further questions, shoot these guys a note privately. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Austin.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Thanks, Zeke.